I just wanted to, when you were reading your lines, all I wanted to do was every time you took a breath, I just wanted to go, "How dare you? How dare you?" Because every time I'm reading this, I'm just getting Greta in my head going, "How dare you, John Ward? You don't understand." Um, anyway, shall we go? 5, 4. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another E5 podcast. This special podcast is the continuation of our Amendment 2 summary, debate, chat, information. We've done a YouTube webinar with Mr. Sparky Ninja himself, which was awesome. Dave is busy, he may jump into this. We never know with Dave because he has open access to just plug himself into the matrix that is these podcasts. But we're going to carry on where we left off in this. I'm Paul Meenan, for those of you who may not know me, or this may be your first time, and I am joined by one of my regular tag team partners and good friends. Introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm JW.
JW, thank you very much for joining me on this this journey of knowledge and debate. And it's fair to say that this is an interesting journey, this Amendment 2. So for those who are not aware or haven't listened to part 1, this is trying to encourage people to go away and comment and have your view, because everybody's view and opinion, whether it's right or wrong, everybody has a right to it. Everybody has a view. Use the BSI website if you can to add your comments. Just have a little patience, as Take That once said in one of their songs, because it's a difficult system to navigate. And yeah, we'll carry on. So, John, I think we were left on our last podcast talking about protected escape routes and the death of plastic mini trunking. Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, good riddance to that if it actually does get rid of. So,
yeah. So for the domestic dwelling installer, that's going to be an interesting one for the future dwelling installers. I just love that term. It's great. It's just got so much legs.
Yeah. So bringing the steel conduit is the takeaway from that. So
right.
Anyway, moving on to over voltage control, which is a fairly sizable section.
An interesting fancy way of saying surge protection device, but it is control of over voltages, isn't it?
Yeah, and this is over voltages from lightning strikes, lightning strokes, and also switching and other kinds of activity on the system, which can happen normally. So lots of different ways that this can occur. And the particular section here is 443.4, which has been pretty much totally rewritten and changed out of all recognition.
Is it fair to say terribly rewritten?
Yes. I think the first problem is that the new bit they've written, the first line is a note, which that's not a good sign, is it?
I am not the best person for English and grammar, and I'll be honest with you, I failed my GCSEs in English, but even I know you don't start something with a note, not something like the wiring regulations anyway, because if you are, I don't know. It's just like somebody played mix up. They got like loads of paragraphs and just sort of slid them around the page, and they went, "Yeah, there you go, that'll do." I don't understand it.
It is a strange one, but anyway, the first bit is a note, and it's note 1, and it's for protection against transient overvoltages due to direct lightning strikes. See regulation 44311. Well, that's nice. We'll look at that later. And then note 2, which is the second part before we even get to any regulation. The installation of surge protective devices is intended to provide voltage limitation in order to facilitate installation coordination and protect against damage to current using equipment. Now, what on earth are they talking about with insulation coordination?
I think that's a spelling mistake, John.
Yeah, installation sounds a bit more likely, doesn't it? But anyway.
Well, at least they paid attention to it. That's the most important thing, that somebody actually paid attention to it, or they understood it so much that they got it back. No, they didn't. They didn't. Yeah, I'll shut up.
That needs a looking at, because it's what are they meaning? So anyway, 2 notes, and then we actually get to part of the regulation itself. Protection against transient overvoltages shall be provided where the consequence caused by the overvoltage could result in serious injury to or loss of human life. And the second one is significant financial data loss. And for good measure, they stuck another note in the middle of those two, which says, this includes electrical systems associated with safety services as defined in Part 2. So this is quite a change from what we had previously, which was basically a list of several items which covered basically everything. And we've still got the useless exception except for swinger dwelling units, for all of the cases where the consequences of an overvoltage of atmospheric origin are considered to be intolerable, a risk assessment according to Regulation 443.5 shall be performed in order to determine if protection against transient overvoltages is required.
Can we not just get someone to say, right, this is a complex subject, there's got to be a way of Janet and John in this? And when I say Janet and John in, I mean simple layman, simple, clear English. Do you know what? I would, to me, this looks like many cooks have spoilt the broth, to be honest with you, and too many people have debated it. Whereas I personally think that because I know Dane are on JPEL and I know Kirsty from Surge Protection are on it, they're the only two people that should have anything to do with the writing of this.
Yeah, this is what it ought to say is put Surge Protection in, end of story, because it's not, there aren't really any circumstances where you wouldn't want to have it. And this thing about the value of putting stuff in dwellings and all this other nonsense, it's all spurious, really. And then even with that risk assessment, if you've got to that risk assessment, you've probably done something wrong and missed a load of stuff out. So that's apparently still going to be in there. But
I guarantee you that'll be removed in part. What was it? Not part. No, Amendment 3. It'll be Amendment 3 on 19th edition. Eventually, they'll get it right. What I find just so infuriating is the journey that electricians have to go on, whereas it shouldn't be like that. The industry bodies should be doing far more, rather than just turning and saying, well, you're the installer, you're an installer, it's down to you. We're not doing enough as an industry. We're not. I'm sorry, but we're not. I don't see it. I'd love to say I do see it, but I don't.
Yeah. And
let's be honest about it. If the industry bodies were doing enough, we wouldn't be doing these podcasts.
Exactly.
We wouldn't need to.
So,
sorry. Right, should I move on to now part 5?
Yeah, right. We'll leave part 4 because there is some other notes and bits, but ultimately it's just a
anything of key that you might want to tell us quickly
in part 4, other than there's local notes in that particular regulation, which yeah, and the thing about the not protection is not required for single dwelling units where the total value of loss therein does not justify such protection. Well, that's no house anywhere. Bear in mind, 50 quid for a surge device. What's in your house that costs more than that? Everything. So yeah, basically the intent of it is primarily the same. It's just been rewritten and jumbled up and mixed around and thrown onto the page. So
fair enough. Right, part 5 then. So part 5 of BS 7671, one of my favourite parts, the good old. This is what I call the meat on the bones part, if for want of a better term, because once you made it into part 5, you are effectively selecting and erecting, aren't you? Effectively.
Yeah, that's it.
So leakage currents. Well, we're going to the first part. There are lots of little changes. There's some changes to like wiring colours, but that's just for DC, where they're harmonising with America and stuff. But regulation 543.71201. So this is a UK specific. So anything that ends with a 200 reg is UK specific. So the committee called JPEL, which is a Joint Power and Electrical Committee, they made the decision. So when you're told we have to do this because we're told by Europe, rubbish. We can make our own regulations. Down to us. I still don't understand the whole Brexit thing, but there you go. This regulation has been deleted by Amendment 2. And what it used to say was, equipment having a protective conductor current exceeding 3.5 milliamps, but not exceeding 10 milliamps, shall be either permanently connected to the fixed wiring installation without the use of a plug and socket, or by connecting by means of plug and socket complying with 60309-2. This was always a weird one, John, wasn't it?
Yeah, this whole thing about the leakage current from equipment, it was all very well, assuming you knew what the leakage current from the equipment actually was, which is information which is locked away and hidden away in various other standards which people don't have access to. But in any event, it's being removed now. So
it is, but it's not just that, John, because to get access to the standards that deal with leakage current, we worked out the other day would cost about 24,000 of the Queen's pounds, which is ridiculous in itself, considering that all the people sit on these committees are volunteers and that this is public safety information. But what do we know? 54371.204 in the current 18th edition has also been deleted by Amendment 2. That regulation, and this is one that has caused so many fallouts in our industry and arguments, and it states where two protective conductors are used in accordance with 54371.203, another UK reg, the ends of the protective conductor should be terminated independently. So that's just the two terminals in the back of the sockets or the spurs. At 2 points throughout the circuit, e.g. distribution board, junction box, socket outlets. This requires an accessory to be provided with two separate earth terminals. That's now gone.
Well, I'm quite glad of that, because I don't think anybody ever installed those properly, especially in the distribution board, because to do it properly, you'd have to buy another whole earth bar from the manufacturer and fit it in there, and then put some in that one and some in the other one. And then there was the question of, if you put a ring circuit in, is it sufficient having a single ring of earth conductor, or do you need to put two rings of earth conductors in, or CPCs? So anyway, all that's gone away, assuming this is put into the final version. So we don't need to bother anymore, it would seem.
That's true. The next one is there's some labelling changes, John, to say the least. When we say labelling changes, are they labelling? Yeah, they are, I suppose. So Regulation 514.12.2, where an installation incorporates an RCD, an instruction notice should be fixed at a prominent position. That has now changed to an instruction notice of such durable material as likely to remain easily legible throughout the life of the installation. Now, that's an interesting term. Instruction notice, durable material, life of the installation. That's very much an asset management term. What is the designed life of the installation? You know, are we now looking finally at accepting that an installation has a life? Because we know from research, John, and we're probably going to cover this in a future webinar, RCDs actually have a life.
Yeah, and AFTDs definitely do, because electronics powered on, these things do not last forever, especially when they're on 24 hours a day. So life of the installation, and unfortunately in the domestic area, half of it, people's view on life of the installation is you installed it in 1950 and it's good forever, which is why you still find lead covered wiring and stuff like that in the various places.
But John, that just shows you straight away that we now again have another shift in the mindset. The installation that we turned up at that was lead, that was, you know, VIR stuff that lasted 50, 60, 70 years. The minute you introduce electronics into an installation, you don't have a 50-year installation. You have a far reduced. I can see in about 10, 15 years, every domestic installation being recommended to have a 20 to 30-year life max.
Yeah, absolute maximum. And I think the other thing which will change is this whole do the installation and put on the label inspect in 10 years time, because for a lot of parts of it 10 years is way too long. So yes, that could end up being 5 years.
Well, that guidance note in guidance note 3 is for the designer of the installation, right, on a new initially verified installation, not necessarily an existing installation, because an existing installation should be assessed and the frequency determined on the condition of it and the risk of the installation. But we just keep going, oh yeah, it's 5 years, 10 years. No, hang on a minute, you've just failed the installation. Why would you put every 5 years?
Yeah,
it's obviously high risk. So it's down to the inspector. Now this labeling change, which is quite interesting, because what it now does is it says, and this is the interesting part, 514.12.2, the requirements of this regulation need not be applied for domestic, and then it puts in brackets household premises. Should I not say dwellings?
Should do.
Yes, another mistake. There's mistakes everywhere. Or similar installations where the fixing of the notice is not. So what this comes down to is there are too many damn labels. So it's down to you to determine what's reasonably practicable, because you're not going to be able to fit every label. Now, I think what we should be doing is getting the templates for consumer units and designing them so that you can get a wrap that goes over the entire board that has all of the labeling that you require, or has a space allocated for each type of label. That's just a personal view. There is an example, and the label has slightly changed because the diagram shows it must be a minimum font size of 7 now. It also, for this one, has this installation protected by device that develops a fault. It says test 6 monthly. I can't disagree with that regulation wording anymore, because 6 monthly, I don't know if they've come up with a law of averages, but if you look at CP Fusebox, their breakers and their RCBOs they state test monthly. ABB stuff says test every 12 months, not taste. What am I talking about? So 6 monthly, is that a law of averages? I don't know. I would rather have a blank space that the installer just writes in whatever the product device's recommendation is.
Yeah, I think this is an improvement because it now does state the actual size of the text, whereas previously all it said was not smaller than printed in this book.
Yes, and that was a disaster, wasn't it?
Yeah, a complete bust on the 18th, where they printed it in this huge jumbo-sized text for some reason.
Yep.
And the other problem with putting
corrigendum, didn't it?
Yeah, they did. And the other problem with doing that is if you can say no bigger than printed in this book, well, how many people actually buy the printed version now? What about people just buying the electronic versions? Because, of course, if it's electronic, the size depends on what you're viewing it on. If you're viewing it on a 50-inch television or viewing it on a little phone, it's kind of meaningless. So finally, they have actually put in the specified size of the text and various other things like the colour and whatever else. So really, it's just about time. So
I completely agree. Moving on, there's another label change. Well, there's quite a few label changes, but periodic inspection and testing. It currently states an instruction notice of such durable material as to likely remain legible throughout the life of the installation shall be fixed in a prominent position at or near the origin of every installation. That now has changed ever so slightly. It now states, hang on, it now states an instruction notice of such durable material as to be likely remain legible shall be fixed in a prominent position at or near the origin of each installation upon completion of the work carried out in accordance with chapter 64, 65. The notice shall be described in indelible characters and shall read as follows. Now they've deleted not small of those illustrated here, which is a bit of a weird one. And then they go on to say that the requirements of regulation need not be applied for domestic, but where the fixing is not reasonably practicable. But John, I'll be honest with you, all this not reasonably practicable malarkey, what'll end up happening is you can get contractors, they'll make up a printed sign, won't they, like an A4 sign, which can then laminate, and they can then screw and fix or put it into a frame, which then sits next to the board. And that would be all of your electrical installation guidance.
Yeah, and the other way you could do it, which is listed here, is that you could provide it on the actual certificate, or more likely some kind of building manual and that sort of thing, which we mentioned in the first episode of this series. So you don't have to, assuming this goes through, put the labels on the consumer unit if you're going to give, say, a big folder of stuff for the whole installation to the responsible person for that particular building. Now, how that's going to work in domestic is another story, because if anyone's ever done domestic, you'll probably know that when you give people the certificates, first of all, there's this big thing of surprise as what's all this stuff, and then it gets stuck in the drawer, or even worse, in the bin, and is never looked at again. So, yeah.
It's
interesting,
difficult one, isn't it, John?
But how it's going to work in reality is a bit of an unknown in that regard. So,
also, John, the labels have changed, as in they were square, now they're round-edged. Huge change.
Yeah, they've shown them with rounded edges, which I
like them.
Yeah.
In fairness, John, I don't know if you remember, that's how they used to be. They used to be rounded years ago. Do you remember the silver ones you used to be able to get?
Yeah.
They still exist on many a board. They were round-edged years and years ago. Moving on, RCDs. Now, this is the controversy you're all waiting for. There was a regulation. Well, when I say there is a regulation, 53132, unwanted tripping. Residual current devices shall be selected and erected, such as to limit the risk of unwanted tripping. Now, it says the following shall be considered. So, John, split load boards.
Yeah, I mean, split load boards have been popular forever. However, the reality is, in a modern installation, a split load board is not going to comply with any of this. And the problem is that even at the moment, we've got the thing where you can't have the leakage current being more than 30% of the RCD rating, which is 9 milliamps. And on a split load board, you've got, say, 5 circuits on it, 2 milliamps per circuit, not likely. And what they've now added in this particular regulation is point 2, which says the use of RCBOs for individual final circuits in domestic installations is something you should be considering. And see also section 314. So split load boards or dual RCD boards or whatever you call them, going away, because you can't, even at the moment, you can't realistically comply by just sticking one of those in, because leakage currents on typical appliances that have such things, 1-2 milliamps each in some cases.
So let me have the debate now. So this is an interesting one. I know a lot of people are going to get annoyed listening to this, so I apologise in advance. The current regulation talks about where it says RCD shall be selected and directed to reduce the risk of unwanted tripping. This should be considered. So it gives a number of bullet points, 5 of them in the current regulations. And that says subdivision of circuits of individual RCDs. Now that kind of spells it out straight away, doesn't it really? Subdivision of circuits of individual RCDs. RCD should be selected and the circuit subdivided in a way that any earth leakage is likely to occur during normal operation. The connected load will not cause unwanted tripping. See section 314. If you look at section 314, for those who don't have a regs book handy, it is called division of installation, and states every installation shall be divided into circuits as necessary to avoid danger and minimise inconvenience in the event of a fault, facilitate safe inspection, testing and maintenance, take account of hazards that may arise from the failure of a single circuit, such as lighting, reduce the possibility of unwanted tripping of RCDs due to excessive protective conductor currents not due to a fault, mitigate the effects of electromagnetic disturbances and prevent the indirect energising of a circuit intended to be isolated. So straight away, part 1 is saying subdivide into RCDs. Now that could be split load, or even more. You could have 2 split load boards in parallel if you've considered it. Realistically, that ain't going to happen. So it then says the use of the new one introduces the use of RCBOs for individual final circuits, which then refers back to division. It then goes on to state, and this is existing regs now, in order to avoid unwanted tripping by protected conductor currents and or earth leakage currents, because they're the 2 things that can occur, the accumulation of such currents downstream of the RCD shall not be more than 30%, as you said. And there's a note, it allows better selection of the RCD type, and also RCDs may operate at any value of the residual current in excess of 50% of. We know some devices are sensitive, John, so they can trip 30 milliamp, can trip at 24 milliamp. That's why we do ramp tests. So there are a lot of guys at the moment who are putting in split load boards and they're saying, that's all I can do to feed my family. You know, how dare you anybody tell me otherwise? Well, you can do what you want, but the trouble is the minute this industry becomes regulated, you are knowingly either ignoring or misunderstanding the regulations. Now, I've never agreed with split load boards on RCDs. To be honest, I've always gone with RCBOs. Yes, they're more expensive, but it's not the fault of the installer. This is the industry bodies who need to do more to tell the end users, by the way, this interpretation, this means you should have this, especially now the fact that we've put more and more electronics in homes over the last 10 years. So yeah, that's kind of that really. This is pretty much a bit more robust narrative in this regulation to just try and remind people to avoid unwanted tripping, use RCBOs effectively.
Yeah, and this thing about division of installation isn't new. That's been in there since at least the 15th edition, which came out in 81, with some minor changes over the years. So it's been there for decades. It's just unfortunate that it's been kind of ignored and overlooked for quite a long time.
Yeah, and I agree. And this is the trouble. It has been ignored and overlooked. And this is why in the last one they put the 30%. So in the 18th edition I'm talking about, they introduced the 30%, which was a real opener for a lot of sparks, because I remember doing lectures and talks to electricians in Northern Ireland and stuff, where I would say, guys, we need to think about these RCDs, because I remember them coming in as supplementary protection against indirect shock. Now they become mandated. We need to really consider what can affect them, so that, you know, that fixed to field equipment interacting with the protective devices. That's a new way of thinking, and it's one we can't stress enough. You need to think about it, and the reason why. Moving on to the next changes to the regulation, again around RCDs.
Yeah, RCDs, there are different types of RCDs, and they've existed for a long time. And
Nearly
at the
20
moment,
years, John. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, they're certainly not new. And at the moment, it unfortunately says you can use Type AC RCDs for general purposes, whatever that is. And a big change here, which is actually very small in the actual writing, but has implications. 53133 will now say, for general purposes, only Type A RCDs may be used. So Type AC RCDs, which is the most common one that's been installed for basically ever, will no longer be allowed for the vast majority of installations. And for those that don't know, Type ACs are the ones that only work on AC loads, and that's things like heating equipment, filament lighting, and that's pretty much it. Type A's do the same, and they also include protection up to 6 milliamps of pulse DC. And then you have your Type F, which goes up to 10 milliamps of DC protection and also covers other types of like higher frequencies and things. And then you have your Type B, which does all of those things and deals with up to 10 milliamps of DC and smooth DC as well. So the death of Type ACs.
So, John, I'm going to add to that just for those listening or viewing. So a lot of new washing machines now that you can buy are inverter driven. And if you look in the manufacturer's instructions, they will state Type A protection, where it says an RCD, and it will show a waveform with a weird set of hills underneath that waveform. That's the symbol for a Type A. Bit of general knowledge for you. So I remember fitting MK boards 20 years ago. And I remember when the MK RCBO's out, and there's a lot of MK equipment that is Type A that was Type A 20 years ago. So when you're doing an EICR on an existing installation, just double check, look really closely, because you may find there are hundreds of thousands of installations where they're Type A and have been for 20 years, which is excellent. I know of someone who bought a coffee maker, which required a Type F device, which if you follow the letter of the regulations, and I'm saying this generally, if you want the device to trip if there's a fault, you would need a separate fuse board and a dedicated circuit just for that socket outlet to actually have that in and comply. And again, you can see what's happening here. The white goods manufacturers, John, it's all being kicked into the homeowner and the consumer, and it's the electricians who have to be the bearer of bad news.
Yeah, I mean, the washing machine thing, I mean, I had to buy a new washing machine fairly recently because the old one destroyed itself. And it was
you didn't destroy it?
No. It was a Hotpoint one I bought, and it was 250 quid, so we're not talking about some high-end, overpriced, expensive thing.
Yeah.
And on the front panel it says inverter drive. So there you go. Bottom-end washing machines, inverters inside, which are not going to be suitable with a Type AC RCD.
And no arc fault detection built in either, John.
Yep. And that didn't say in the instructions which type it should have, but the very presence of its inverter drive for the motor means you're going to get stuff coming out on the supply there, which is not going to be a pure AC sine wave. So,
no, it's not, and that's one of the key things as well. Is this pure AC sine wave? More and more equipment now is converting AC into DC, which is it's not doing the waveform any good. To be perfectly frank, yes, it gives us the energy benefits, but for the national grid, it causes chaos. And there's a standard called G55. If you're really keen, go away and have a look. That will keep you up at night. But it even gives a note examples of fixed equipment containing those DC, so it tells you what it is. Which means when we are coding to Amendment 2, this is going to be this is now going to be codable Type ACs, really, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And the examples it's given of things that you could use with a Type AC is electric heating appliances and simple filament lighting, which does not include electronic transformers or dimmer control. Well, there's not a lot of simple filament lighting left in the world now because it's all gone to LEDs and all of that. And in terms of electric heating appliances, that means a thing with just a heating element in it and possibly a mechanical thermostat. And that's it. And there's not many of them either.
Sorry about that. I was just telling my dog to get out because she was making too much noise. Note 3 in this new regulation, well, new regulation, reworded regulation 53133, it talks about guidance on the correct use of RCDs for household and similar use. See PD IEC TR 62350. Now, what this is published document IEC, International Electrotechnical Committee, /TR technical report. So it's not necessarily a standard, but what it is someone's actually done the research and written this technical report says this is how for households you need to configure RCDs. Because the one thing that you don't do is you don't have an AC RCD with then type A downstream, because it's kind of pointless really. Whereas your AC RCD will be fine, but the upstream one, any effects of DC will saturate and you still won't have a protected circuit. Case in point is now a lot of the boiler manufacturers are giving away free A-type RCD fuse spurs, thinking that will provide some form of protection, when in actual fact it doesn't.
No, this is an important point in that you could use that, but you can't have it supplied from a type AC RCD in your consumer unit.
Yeah.
Because faults downstream will affect the one upstream and then it won't work. So if you're going to fit them, they've got to basically go in the consumer unit. And yes, that means new consumer units, new devices, just because you bought a coffee maker.
But and also it also recommends as well the type Bs and the type F. If you follow IEC technical report, type Bs, anything that is of a higher influence. So for instance, type F and type B, under the current standard, you would have to segregate them from the type A, because obviously to do with earth faults, earth leakage, etc. If you have high frequencies and they're in the same board, type F and type B could overwhelm the type A's, which would mean they don't work. So you now have to segregate these, which again means new subboards, which is why EV chargers, where they state type B, or well, in general, it's good practice to have a separate mini board just for the EV chargers. But we need to be mindful of this, and I really hope, and it is my hope, that eventually the requirements or the recommendations of this technical report end up into an appendix in 7671, along with all the values, as we've discussed before, John, of earth leakage for all of the products. That way electricians have half a chance of using really good data to design the installations to ensure that there's not nuisance tripping. Because if you're a one-man band or a contractor and you're installing a board and the stuff that you didn't know they were going to connect into is tripping it out left, right, center, it's going to damage your reputation. You're going to be doing callbacks. It's going to cost you money. And this is what we don't want. We don't want people doing work and having, because there isn't enough information in the regulations, it costing them money, or hiding the information they need behind a paywall.
Yeah, and the paywall theme in that particular technical report, you can buy it. It's £182.
Such value.
Or if you're a member of BSI, it's only 91, as if that's some kind of special offer. But it's a lot of money, and it's just a single document.
And it's not a very long document either, John. It's very, very short. And in fact, I think it's fair to say that if you look on our Instagram account, you may get the summary there, because I have done presentations for the IET, lectures and stuff, where I've taken the key information out of it, which is basically a diagram, and it just shows you the configuration of RCDs.
Yeah,
basically. So please check out our Instagram account if you want to know more there. That's kind of the repository of our knowledge sharing, for want of a better term. But also there is within 62305 a formula for leakage, to work out leakage. Now there is a table, and this table basically has the formula of, to work out the leakage current per circuit, you take the sum of the connected appliances and you times it by 0.75. So if you have a printer, for instance, it says the printer potentially leaks 0.5 to 1 milliamp. So straight away you can have 9 printers on a circuit. You then times it by 0.75. That gives you a bit of tolerance. So you can probably end up with about 12 printers on one circuit if you wished.
Yeah, and this is obviously for some sort of office or something like that. But
yes.
It again shows how easy it is to get up to that 9 milliamps maximum, which is why this sort of split or twin RCD board is no good really, because that's one circuit. And of course, the printer is the sort of low end there. We've got some other examples there of anything up to 3.5 milliamps for one appliance.
And it's worth telling people, Schneider have produced a very good document recently, which is a guide to protective devices. It's their updated RCD guide. They have more information than this standard, because this standard's dated 2006, the technical report. So they've gone out and got some of those standards, and even in their document it states like cookers, for instance, potentially can leak up to a maximum of 10 milliamp. Straight away, dedicated circuit.
Yeah. So no way you're going to put that on with anything else.
Well, and you're not going to put a socket in the cooker outlet anymore either, are you, John?
No, I mean they're gone basically, because
Yeah, they're gone.
10 milliamps already. You can't have anything else plugged in. So
Bye. So there's another one for your coding when Amendment 2 comes out. See, it's always good to just do this and then go away and think about it, because we're covering more now than what we covered in the webinar. Different thoughts and feelings and all that good stuff. Yeah, so if you actually do the work, and you do the work properly, and you're able to obtain the standards and read the standards, you will find that split loads kind of died off a while ago.
yeah.
It's just how do we have the information for the consumers to force them to transition, to accept the diligence of the installer? And that is a problem electricians share regularly on social media, and it's something that the industry, and when I say the industry, I mean the voluntary regulatory, are doing nothing to support. It's embarrassing that we're having to sit on these podcasts and say, dear electrical industry, please do something to support the installers in their technical knowledge, and also in changing the hearts and minds of consumers to make this just as important as bloody gas is.
Yeah, and this whole split load board thing is not helped by the fact that certain DIY sheds, shall we call them, are knocking out these horrendous twin RCD boards for like 60 quid. And then the general public get an idea of, oh, that's how much a consumer unit should cost, when in reality, no, that's fiction. A decent consumer unit is hundreds of pounds.
And I'm gonna make a very controversial statement, John. If anyone sits or allows B&Q, Wix's, or any of these places that sell these split load boards, Toolstation, to sit on any industry panel, then shame on you, because they are part of the problem. I'm not trying to kick or besmirch Screwfix or anything like that, but why can't Screwfix, Toolstation, etc., not restrict the sale of electrical goods? I'm talking about fuse boxes here, which is covered by Part P anyway, so nobody should be able to go in and buy a fuse board. Even to say, right, well, you need to show us your registration of your CPS or your gold card or whatever, but they need to take some form of steps to stop this rubbish happening. Too many electricians I've spoken to recently have said, oh, I've priced this job and they're giving me the board, I've got to fit it. Wrong, because you're taking responsibility for the design of that installation. The consumer is not the designer. They're not competent to be the designer, John.
No, they can't. And if you're just going to buy some random pre-filled consumer unit for 60 quid, well, it's not going to be suitable for the installation you've got. Even if twin RCD things were a suitable thing, what the other stuff in it is not going to match up with your circuit. So no. Yeah, this whole thing of a 60 quid consumer unit needs to go away, because that is completely unrealistic.
Yeah, it's a crock. It's an utter crock, to be honest with you, and it gets on my nerves. Right, just moving on then, just a little bit more labelling. So in the current regulations, there's a requirement for an Spd label, 534417. The presence of SPDs installed downstream of a distribution board, i.e. in a socket outlet, i.e. type 3s, shall be permanently indicated by a label. Now you can see why the reasonably practicable is coming in. It now states, 534417, the presence of SPDs in an installation shall be indicated by a label at or near the distribution board. The label shall also include instructions checking the status. Now that then straight away allows the regulation, or the clause that's in all the labelling clauses now, that states the requirements of this regulation need not be applied for domestic, because there's just too many.
Yeah, I mean, there's a limit to how many labels you want on something, and as soon as you're putting 4, 5, 6, 10 labels on something, nobody's going to read them anyway. It's just going to be this slab of information, and who's going to see it? So yeah, it all fits in with the rest of the other labelling things. So you may not need to put it on there. You can put it in a building management document or something, should you have such a thing.
John, I do. I love a label, you know.
You like labels, yes.
I love labels. I'll be honest with you, I am virtually having nightmares, sleepless nights, thinking about how I label my new fuse box. I want somebody to look at it and just go, oh, that looks stunning. The information is so well laid out. The more thought you put into labeling, the more thought that's gone into the installation, has always been my professional view. I can easily see like a clipsal frame, which is a frame you can buy on Amazon, and you just basically, the edges pop out like you get in the service stations, and then you just get a sheet of A4 where you design all your labeling. It goes in there, you clip it in, the next contractor just pop it out and update the labeling accordingly, or put notes for the installation. That I don't think would be beyond reasonable to do, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fairly simple and relatively low cost thing to do, so why not? Much better than
Indeed.
scribbling on the board with a biro or something and all that. So
Indeed. Right. So shall we move on to the new term, the new kid on the block, foundation earthing?
yeah, I think this is a good idea actually. And there are some people who think it's horrendous and horrendous expensive, but it isn't really.
Well, I'll read out the regulation. So it says 54212202. So it's a UK specific. So we've come up with this, or we've agreed it. When I say we, the UK JPEL committee, it states for new premises constructed upon foundations, each building in which there is an installation using the protective measure of automatic disconnection of supply, formerly known as EBADOS, shall be provided with one of the following. 1. A concrete embedded foundation earth electrode in accordance with Annex A 542. 2. A soil embedded ring earth electrode in accordance with the same annex. Or an equivalent earth electrode as that afforded by metalwork of a steel frame building embedded in concrete foundations in contact with the soil. A value of resistance to earth not exceeding 20 ohms shall be provided by the earth electrode or collectively where electrodes of 2 or more buildings are connected together. The earth electrode shall be connected to the main earthing terminal of the installation by a main protective bonding conductor, not an earthing conductor, please note. For the purpose of this requirement for an installation in multiple premises, the protective conductor of the service line or distribution circuit supplying that shall be deemed to be the main protective conductor, i.e. your submain. In dwellings, for outbuildings such as detached garages and sheds, an earth electrode in accordance with 1, 2 or 3 need not be provided, because you'll have it anyway, I assume.
Yeah. Now, this might sound like a big pile of stuff and a big pile of extra work and putting in foundation electrodes and all that, but for most buildings, the reality is 99% of the stuff you need is already going to be put in, because first of all buildings are constructed on foundations, they're not just bunged on the soil and hope. So you're going to have foundations anyway. In most cases, your foundations are going to have some kind of steel reinforcement in them, highly unlikely not to. So in most cases, all this is going to be is you're going to put your foundations in like you do anyway. You're going to pour the concrete in on the top. The only extra bit you need is some method to connect to that metal reinforcement that's buried in the concrete and in the foundation. So it's a little tiny box on the corner where you can open the lid. There's your metal reinforcement inside. Connect your bonding conductor onto that. And the other important point here is we're not talking about TT systems here. This is going to be most likely a TNCS or PME supplied to that building, and this foundation earth electrode is connected to that, which is why they've called it a main bonding conductor. It's not a TT installation where you don't have a separate, or you've got a separate electrode just for that.
Yeah, it's also worth adding that the reasoning behind the difference between an earthing conductor, because there is only one earthing conductor in an installation. Now, a lot of people argue, and I had this thought process on the Monday, was, well, technically you now have 2 earthing conductors, but this foundation electrode is about managing. This is effectively allowing your installation to remain energized when you're in island mode. And one of the key risks in island mode is a rise in potential of the ground, so that you can, potentially get shock conditions. So this is a protective bonding conductor, because the key point of this is a rise of potential in the surrounding area. So ensuring that you, when you're using your island mode, are not going to step out of your house, touch a piece of metalwork and get killed. So it is still a bonding conductor. So I actually think this is a good thing on new builds. I think it'll be very difficult to retrospectively be done. It was kind of referenced, wasn't it, in the 18th edition draft in 2017? But everyone went mental, going, "Where do I put my rods? Where do I put my rods? This is impossible," and just went mental.
Yeah, that particular one would have been a bit of a fail because it didn't specify foundation electrodes. It just said an electrode. So then there was people flinging rods out of the flat with 20th window of a block of flats or something. But yeah, this is just for new premises. So you're going to have your foundations anyway, because what building doesn't? So cost of providing this is almost zero, but the benefits are significant. And the only bit I don't like is this thing about not exceeding 20 ohms, because 20 ohms for a foundation electrode is ridiculously high. And it's, although if you're thinking about putting a single earth rod in the ground, 20 ohms seems impossible. But if you've got a massive slab of concrete full of metal, getting under 20 ohms is incredibly easy. And if you actually got something like 20 ohms, something's gone horribly wrong. Certainly in the single digit ohms, and even less is relatively easy to achieve with almost no effort there. So that 20 ohms thing is a tad on the high side.
Yeah, I agree. And also, it's worth noting that Ofgem wrote to the wrote to the committee about 2012, I think, and they actually raised the issue of stating 20 ohms was wrong in their opinion, and that the installation should work out what the fault voltages are rather than just stating a generic value, which they basically pinched from BS 7430, which is the code of practice from earthing. Which, yeah, I agree with you. It should be a far lot lower than this. And by the way, in case you're wondering, oh, electrodes, what do I do? There is alternatives. There is materials called conjucrete. There's benzonite, which is a more familiar name. And there is other products other than rods you can use. There's one called a conjudisc. And yeah, so there's lots and lots of alternative products out there that you can use to provide your earthing system now rather than a traditional rod. So there will be a podcast on just the whole conjudisc and conjucrete and all that good stuff coming soon.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So yeah, this is a good thing generally, and I say it's just a question of connecting to your metal reinforcement in your concrete foundation in most cases. So relatively forward.
Right. Shall we move on to part 6, or is there any other bits in part 5 other than the usual typos?
Yeah, I think like the rest of it, I mean, part 5, there's various other minor little changes and full stops removed and all that kind of thing, but nothing of particular huge relevance there. There's a thing like USB sockets are not regarded as socket outlets anymore, and other odd bits and pieces, but nothing that's desperately surprising. So we may as well move on to 6.
Okay, so part 6, inspection and testing. So this is one of the more keen bits. And there is quite a few changes in here, John, but nothing major. For instance, regulation 64331, the insulation resistance reg, has just been reformatted, I think is the term to use there. No real change in the intent of the regulation. They've just reformatted it. Just kind of proves maybe it might have been written ad hoc or a bit slapdash. Regulation 643.3, insulation resistance. That used to state where the circuit, or it currently states, I'll rephrase, where the circuit includes electronic devices which are likely to influence or results or be damaged, only a measurement between the live conductors connected together and the earthing ranges shall be made. Now states, or is now proposed to state, where equipment is likely to influence the verification test or be damaged, the test should be applied prior to the connection of such equipment in accordance with table 64. So test the circuit before you connect the equipment. Then it says, following connection of the equipment, a test at 250 volt DC shall be applied between the live conductor and protective conductor connected to the earthing arrangement. The insulation resistance shall have a value of at least 1 meg. So that's quite interesting, because what they're now saying is basically, whereas before you were connecting your line and neutral conductors and going between earth, and as long as it was above a meg, it was fine. They're now saying, no, disconnect the equipment first, prove the cable, because it should be on verification fine. If you've got 1 meg on verification, you are, or initial verification, you are in deep trouble. They're now saying basically test it twice.
Yeah, the only problem with this in this disconnecting the equipment is that in a lot of cases that is not going to be a practical option. If you think about USB socket outlets, particularly, if you put a whole load of those in a house, you don't want to go around and start disconnecting all the socket outlets and then putting them back, because what you're then testing. So yeah, in some cases disconnecting equipment is valid, but in others it's going to involve basically dismantling half the installation and then sticking it back together again.
And what you're talking about there, John, is risk, because if you're right in what you're saying, but I also disagree with you. So you're right in what you're saying, because if you're doing it on an existing installation and you're just changing one socket, it's not reasonable and practicable to be doing all of that. And then also, especially if you open up a socket and the cables disappear behind a skirting board or they just fall apart, then you're spending a day or two just trying to make repair at your own cost, basically, unless the client, the person ordering the work, will pay for it. But this is very specific, where equipment is likely to influence the verification. So this to me is initial verification of a new circuit. Again, it's the wording of it, John. So I think a comment here back to the committee that says, is this an initial verification? Is it of a new circuit? Or is it of an existing circuit? They might want to put a note differentiating between new and the alteration and addition. That would clear that up.
Yeah, because as I say, it's unrealistic to expect to dismantle a whole existing thing and then just stick it back together after you've finished. So.
Yeah, so there is next one is earth loop impedance. So regulation 64373, earth loop impedance, they've changed it. So the title is called earth loop impedance and prospective fault current. So there's an inference straight away. We need to be looking at prospective fault current levels there, John. And I think that's in there because of what we're going to cover in part 8, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. There's a whole lot of stuff in there which is quite a different way of looking at everything. So yeah, I think that's very likely why that's been put in.
And we'll cover that in the next part, because this will be the last section we cover in this podcast. There's lots of extra notes put in. So note 1, it states this is a new part of the regulation. The validity of test readings taken with an earth loop impedance test instrument may be adversely affected by the power converting equipment such as inverters. Yeah, no poo Sherlock, absolutely. Which is why I've always said disconnect all equipment, switch everything off, and unplug everything when you're doing earth loop impedance tests. I don't know why we would, to be perfectly frank, because at the end of the day we're testing the wiring, not the fixed field equipment. But then again, maybe that's the case now. Maybe we're having to accept that fact. It then says further information on measurement of earth loop impedance can be found in Appendix 3. And the rest of the regulation is about protective measures require a knowledge of earth loop impedances, various methods, etc. And yeah, that's kind of pretty much the only changes on that, really, is the change of the title of the reg number and the notes. John, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's really just adding extra bits in, which are all covered in part 8, which is all new. So and the thing about the inverters, that's going to be things like your solar inverter and also things like battery storage and all the other prosuming type items. So it's not necessarily new information, but it's just been put in just to sort of clarify that this is likely to become more of a problem with all the more modern equipment we're putting in now.
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair to say. And 643.8 additional protection. So this regulation states the verification is existing regulation. The verification of the effectiveness for the measures applied for additional protection is fulfilled by visual inspection and testing. Where RCDs are required for additional protection, the effectiveness of automatic disconnection and supply shall be verified using test equipment. There is a note in that regulation that says effectiveness is deemed to be verified when an RCD meeting the requirements of regulation 415 disconnects within 40 milliseconds when tested at current equal to or greater than 5 times its rated residual operating current. That's been deleted.
Yeah, I don't really understand why they got rid of this. It's
this smells like Hager all over it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just saying you don't need to do this test anymore, which is it's basically a 5 times test, which let's face it, every RCD tester ever has done on the actual function of it. So apparently we don't need to do that anymore.
No, this is where it annoys me, because we've read 61008 quite thoroughly, and the reference to 250 milliamps, that higher value that was allowed, was at the top of a table in a throwaway note. That was it. There was no science or anything behind that. Where is the document? And this is what annoys me. If you're going to change the method of working for electricians of the last 25 years, give us some bloody evidence, or give us some information as to the rhyme or reason behind it, and then we will assess it and go, okay, you then have our hearts and minds. You then give us a greater level of understanding, or you at least tell us why and how, so that we can adapt and develop our mindsets, because we've learned something new that we didn't know before. That, deleting a note, I can't even begin to tell you how stupid that is, to be perfectly frank.
There's just no, and of course there's no reason given with it. It's just gone away. Now, it's not to say that if that is in the final version that you can't do that test anymore, because you can. But the problem, if it's not in there, then people are not going to do it, are they? They're just going to say, oh, it's not in the regs, so we don't have to bother. So, yeah, that is a strange one. There's no real reason to get rid of that. So,
right, well, let's go through the certificates. John, do you want to just take us through the summary changes and certificates? I'm going to have a quick look at that Appendix 3, just to see exactly what the changes that it refers to are for RCD. So do you want to just take us through the electrical installation certificate as to any changes of wording or key things that jump out that may have changed?
Yeah, these are the what's called the model certificates, which in reality are the ones that no one actually uses, because they just use obviously software and things now. But these are the sort of basis on which all of those things are designed. Now, on the electrical installation certificate, which of course is for new circuits and new installations, there's a few things they've deleted. It doesn't say IET wiring regulations at the top anymore. That's been crossed out. It just says BS7671. So that's gone. And we've also got some additional text taken away in the actual design section. So where it used to say, and additionally, where the certificate applies to an additional alteration, the safety of the existing installation is not impaired, that text has now been deleted. So all you've got is the exercising reasonable skill and care when carrying out the design, certifying that it complies with that. And another notable thing they've deleted is the section on details of permitted exceptions, which was regulation 4133, and also the bit where you could do a risk assessment and attach it to the certificate. That has also been removed from that. So various things removed there. Other than that, we've got a couple of minor changes. Where we had prospective fault current and it used to say external loop impedance, it now says earth fault loop impedance. That's probably just a change to bring it in line with various other parts which have also changed. Got a new section for RCD type, where you have the RCD main switch, so that's going to be a type A or AC or whatever. And schedule of inspections, got a whole new section which has a list of 13 items which you can tick, which covers things like condition of intake equipment, source of supply, method of protection, and a whole list of other things there. So there's a whole big section been added into that. And a fairly minor change on the schedules there, where it says they've basically deleted a load of text which used to say the attached schedules are part of this document and they're attached to it. Basically, it's now this certificate is valid only when so many pages of test results are attached. So
John, just going back to that note that was blocked or deleted, sorry, the 40 milliseconds test. Table 3A in Appendix 3 hasn't changed at all, but it still has 40 milliseconds as a valid criteria.
Right. So deleted some of it and left the rest in.
It's in the existing regulations. It's still in the new regulations in the appendices. I'm slightly miffed now. So in basically what that's saying is in chapter 6 is maybe you don't have to do it, but it's still a criteria. It's table 3A is an extract from the time current performance criteria for RCDs, and it deals with 10, 20, 30, 60, 50, 100. It's got various grades of non-delay and delay types, a 10, 30, 100, 300, 500 milliamp. It even deals with residual current of 20, 60, 200, 600, and 1000, 51. So it's got all the various type tests. And where you've got 50 or 150 milliamp, still got 40 seconds max.
Yeah. So, yeah, if you're going to delete one, you've got to get rid of the rest. So, yeah,
maybe that's just an error, or maybe that's. I tell you what, my confidence level is very low with. I don't know. Maybe is it a club? Is this JPEL just a club where they have a mirror ball and they dance in it? I don't know.
Yeah. Well. Yeah, that is definitely one to comment on, because if you're going to get rid of that and not get rid of the rest, well, that's not very consistent, is it?
So, no, it isn't. Okay, shall I go through the EICR form then?
Yeah, if we move on to that one, so
Yeah, so the electrical installation condition report, which is a key one for everybody, the word domestic has been crossed out and dwellings appears. I'm having so much fun with that; it's mind blowing. So yeah, dwellings is a key change on the front cover in section C, details the installation. If we move on, they have just done some minor words, deleting the words IET wiring regs. On section F, where it's got recommendations, the overall assessment of suitability, at the very last line, it says, subject to necessary remedial action, I or we recommend the installation is further inspected by X date. But then there's a new bit that says, for following reasons. So you can't just say it's unsatisfactory, test it in 5 years again. Tell us why.
yeah, I think that's a great thing to add in, so people
brilliant.
don't have to actually think about why they're putting down 5, 10 years or whatever it is.
Yep, totally agree. On the section I, supply characteristics and earthing arrangements, they have removed the word external. Rather than saying external earth loop impedance, it now just says earth fault loop impedance. It's still ZE, it's just to harmonise, as we since learned, with the rest of Europe, so it's no too biggie. There's just a lovely little addition in main switch details for RCD type, because we know we're going with types now. We have to identify types of RCDs. And again, not a bad change. No real change to the observations section, and that's pretty much it for the electrical installation condition report.
Yeah, not major changes, but it's all the bits to kind of fit in with changes that are elsewhere, so nothing too surprising there.
Indeed. Minor works, right? Yep. I'll do minor works very quickly. Minor works, I love the minor works form. The more detail on it, the better. Part 4, there is some slight changes to the wording, where it currently says details of departures, if any, from 7671 2018 for the circuit altered or extended. It now states, or is proposed to state, details of any departures from BS 7671 as amended to, so insert the latest version. It then has a really sneaky part where it's got risk assessment attached, has now been deleted. So that's that risk assessment for the socket outlet exemption. I can't see this as a good thing. I refuse to see this as a good thing. This is mandating RCD control over people's installations, when if you have a skill, John, you are a skilled person. You have control over your electrical installation. You should be allowed to, and not allow anyone to criticize you for having a socket outlet to plug all of your NASA equipment behind you there to do your work on. So I think this is wrong. I'm not going to comment on it. Wrong.
Certainly in some situations risk assessments are not appropriate, but in plenty of others they definitely are. So just blanket removal of it, not really what it want to be happening.
No, and again, for me, a risk assessment departure is where the client needs it for operational needs, but more important than what the example I use is for sparks. So if you're an electrician, you're in charge of the electrical installation in your house. You're a skilled person. You better than anybody know the state of it. John knows the state of my wiring. He knows my wiring's in a bad state, but I'm a skilled person observing it and maintaining it, which I am. Trust me, all the time. So if I want a socket that isn't RCD protected, I should be allowed, because I will be the only person with control of that. My control method could be locked off.
Yeah. So this strange choice of just slinging it out.
So just moving on to circuit details quickly for the minor works, they have introduced some new lines. They have asked now for the RCD, the BSEN type of the RCD, the rating, the rated residual operating current, so 32 amp, 30 milliamp or 100 milliamp. They've included now a section on AFDD, which is quite interesting, BSEN rating and BSEN type and the rating, which is always going to be 62606. There's no other standard for it. They have also in part 4 included you to, or require now you to record the test voltage, whereas before it just said live to live, mega ohms at live to earth, mega ohms. They now want the test voltage. The RCD operation is a tick box, whereas before it was residual current milliamp, but that's now kicked up above. And also AFDD satisfactory test button operation with a note. This is a new bit. Not all AFDDs have a test button, as we know, John. Some of them are bolt-on modules.
So no test.
That's in Europe.
But a lot of these changes, they're not particularly significant, and actually if you use certain types of software to do these certificates, you may find that some of these are already on there, because again these are the model forms, so your basic starting point. So
Indeed. So the last bit is the generic. Rephrase that. The So the declaration hasn't really changed. It's just removed the IT wiring regs. Moving on to the schedule of test results as our last bit. And then the schedule of test results has changed. So what they have done is they have where you've got ZS or impedance at the board, that's now ZdB. Instead of having a correct confirmed at dB, they've now put in the word polarity. On the actual schedule of inspections itself, test results, they've included a section after protective device details on RCD, which allows you to put the BSEN number, the type, the I delta N, and the rating, which is brand new. And on the polarity box, they've now put the text of tick or X. Note no limb there.
Yeah, I can't imagine any circumstances where you're going to be putting a cross there, because why would that be happening? So
yeah, tell me about it. Right, and that's it. That's up to part 6. End of part 6. Only got parts 7 and 8 to do. So hopefully this has been of use. You've got to December the 11th to do your commenting and reading and all that good stuff. And yeah, that's about it, really. John, any final thoughts?
no, I think that's covered it pretty well. And so again, there are a lot of other minor, tiny changes in there, which are like sort of your capitals and lowercase and whatever, but as there is with the rest of it. But not really worth going over those, as they don't really make any difference to anybody. So
that's it. As we've always said, thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for watching. Please do the usual things on social media. And yeah, until the next one, part 7 and 8, take care of yourself and each other. Bye-bye.
Bye.